can live with and be sustainable for our future. So thank you.
Thank you.
Rob Anderson, also Harriman resident. I wanted two things. One, I was up on the trails in Harriman Hills the other day on Monday and just wanted to thank all those involved in making those possible. I think they're a great asset and amenity to the city. Just very pleased with them, so thank you. The other thing is just a request. I also ride on a road bike quite a bit. And there, with all the construction going on, there's a lot of debris that's on the sides of the roads, especially in the bike lanes, which makes it really hard for the road bikes to actually ride on the shoulder and in the lanes, which I think creates a safety hazard for motorists and cyclists. So to whatever extent is possible to take a look at cleaning the streets, some of the main ones would be very helpful. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further comment this time, we will close the public comment portion of our meeting. Item 7, council, board, and committee reports.
I just have mosquito abatement, and there's no cases of West Nile so far in Utah this year, so that's good. And if you do see mosquitoes in your area, in your house, in your yards and whatnot, please call the Salt Lake County Mosquito Abatement District, and they can come out and test for those and check on those. And then you should have received a notice, an email notification from Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling for their survey. So please, we'd encourage you all to take that survey. It's a recycling survey just to understand the use that we have in this area for recycling and ways to better educate the public on the recycling industry. So please go online and take that. If you didn't receive the email, you can go to their website and fill out the survey there.
Just a comment, as mentioned previously, I said as a member representative from Harriman on the South Valley Sewer Board, we had the director, Craig White, come in and give a quick presentation or update of the status of the South Valley Sewer District to our council this evening. Again, this is a service I think a lot of times most of us don't even think about. We just know that when we turn on our water, it's going to go down the drain, or flush a toilet, it's going to go where it's supposed to go and be taken care of. But it's a tremendous service that needs to be provided for. And there was a lot of good information that was given that I think would be just helpful knowledge to each of the residents. That was done in our work meeting tonight. So I encourage you just to go back and view either online or hopefully we can get a copy of that presentation posted on our website as well, just so you can see that data. But by the end of this year, just as a matter of information, there will be over 1,000 miles of sewer pipe that needs to be maintained by the sewer district. That's just one small piece of what has to happen in order to maintain that sewer district. But just wanted to publicly acknowledge Craig White and give appreciation for him taking the time to come address the council this evening.
Okay. We will move on to the item 8.1, Youth Council Introduction and Oath of Office. Destiny.
Mayor and Council, thank you for giving us the opportunity to introduce the amazing youth that I have the pleasure of working with for the next year. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update. We had 26 youth serve the last term, and 19 of them qualified for the scholarship money. And we have 15 returning this year. We will have a total of 38 youth council members. So, and with that, I would like to introduce those that are here. We do have some that couldn't make it tonight. And as I call your name, if you guys want to come up, grab your oath of office certificate, and just kind of make a line up here, and then Jackie will do the oath of office. Okay? So we have, and I apologize if I butcher anybody's names. We have Donnie Anderson, Justin Anderson, Katie Anderson, Kennedy Banks, Braxton Bennett, Jaden Bennett, Tanner Christensen. Him. Connor Bray. Parker Dahl. Jake Didenhover. Abby Edwards. Emily Fernley. Mikhail Freeman. Coleman Gagon. I don't see them either. And then Griffin Gagon. Jamin Gray. Sabra Griffith. Austin Henderson. Alexander Hill. Liam Height. Randy Jones. Chloe Lawless. Grace Lunt. Joshua Martindale. Hunter O'Fikens. Haley Pester. Jaden Richardson. Ann So. Leah So. Grace Watson. And then we have Lissa Anderson, Hallie Boren, Bradley Carver, Nicole Lee, Grace Pelch, Lauren Pelch, Solomon Sleater, and Alina Sucker that couldn't make it tonight.
So if any parents would like to take a couple of real quick pictures, and then the city council would like to come down and take a picture with this group, if that's okay.
Destiny, just a thought. It occurs to me that with 38 members, we have got to be one of the largest, if not the largest, youth city councils in the state. And I think that speaks to not only the growth of the community, the quality of youth, but certainly the quality of the program as well. Can you confirm or deny my assumption? I'm going to say we're the largest on the record.
So
Thank you.
first
It's official.
requirement is that you sit through our entire meeting. I'm just
Monty, I
kidding.
think we need to order a bus.
Yeah, we're gonna need a bus this year. So with that, we would love for you to stay for a meeting, but feel free to excuse yourself as you see fit. We don't want you to feel like you must stick around if you have other family responsibilities you need to get to, so please.
I just don't think it's fair they got a copy of the oath to read while they had to repeat it back. I don't remember getting a copy of the oath to read. Destiny must
If
be
you
looking out
can't-
for you already.
If you can't remember the oath, then
I think it's fair they get to leave and go have refreshments, and we have to do the rest of this.
Yeah, no kidding.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. As those who, as some of those excuse themselves, we will move on to item 8.2, Harriman Police Department Sergeant Promotion. Chief Carr.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Again, it's a fantastic night that we are very honored to have you be a part of that with us. And saying that, it kind of includes what we just did here, and that is youth. As you know, as we grew the police department, as we built the police department, we grew, right, while we were doing it. And again, tonight, we're seeing that. As part of our vision and our one-year plan, which is what we're moving into now, was the building of that high school, Mountain Ridge. And as Mountain Ridge became a reality for us, we knew we would have to staff it. And with that, we knew that the school resource unit would grow. And as it grew, it became a span of control issue, and we recognized that as we built the police department. So with that recognition, we decided that we needed a sergeant over that unit to appropriately man it and staff it. And we just finished the first promotional process in the Harriman Police Department history. So one more of those firsts out of the way, right? And tonight I'd like to invite Brad up. Come on up here. We'll invite his family up here very shortly. Brad is number one on that list. And tonight Brad will move from officer to sergeant. And we're very honored by that. I'll turn the time over to Cody Stromberg, Lieutenant Stromberg. As is our tradition and our honor, the commander will give a quick speech, and then we'll have the family come up and pin on a badge, and we'll go from there. Sound good? All right, Cody, you're up.
Mayor and Council, it's my honor and privilege to present to you Brad Bailey, who will be promoted this week to the rank of sergeant. Brad was raised in Michigan, attended Utah State University. He and his wife, Angeline, have been married for 17 years and have 3 children, Austin, Caitlin, and Colton. They are also Harriman residents, so we were very happy to welcome them to our HPD family last year. Brad's an exceptionally distinguished law enforcement officer who has excelled in many assignments, including canine, detective, field training officer, and federal task force officer prior to becoming a founding member of the HPD. Brad has been highly decorated in his career, earning awards for Officer of the Year, 2 Police Stars, Unit of the Year, and for specialty DUI enforcement. Whenever a new officer is hired or a current member of the department is promoted, a badge pinning ceremony takes place, which is what you'll witness here tonight. This is intentionally done in a public setting as a recognition for the hard work and accomplishment of the officer being pinned. As with many aspects of law enforcement, there is both tradition and symbolism associated with a badge pinning. In Brad's case tonight, the removal of the officer badge and the pinning of the sergeant badge symbolizes his commitment to the responsibilities and duties of his new office and title and the transition to a new phase of his law enforcement career. For those who attended our swearing-in ceremony back in September, you'll note the badge is traditionally pinned by a close family member. This is in recognition that those closest to us also bear the burdens of the public safety commitments we've made and will experience with us all the great happiness and the deepest sorrows associated with our noble profession. Brad and his family take on a new family now as we begin to place officers of our department under his charge. Any police commander will tell you the rank of sergeant is the most critical in our police department. Chief Carr spoke earlier this year when we promoted Sergeant Adamson about the Latin origin of the word sergeant to mean one who serves, and it could not be more fitting. We ask these men and women to not only lead from the front by example and inspire those that they lead and serve to be the best officers they can be, but we also ask them to oversee the implementation and enforcement of policy and procedure, the protection of our employees charged to their care, and the need to properly balance concerns for safety and liability with our duty to protect and serve the citizens as they make literal life and death decisions on the streets of our community. Brad now will continue to serve in the operations division with me as a patrol supervisor and will lead the involvement of our new mental health outreach efforts, both within and outside the department. Brad exemplifies every positive characteristic associated with public safety and police leadership, and we have no doubt that he will continue to achieve at the highest level and drive those around him to do the same. Thank you.
Brad, please step over here for me. Honor us to get a picture.
Sergeant, if you, well, I told you. If you have any thoughts or feelings you'd like to share with us or the community, we'd appreciate to hear those.
Certainly. I'm just excited. I'm excited to take on my new role, but I've been excited ever since day one that I've been here. You know, as you mentioned, we are Harriman residents. We have been since 2011, so this was an adventure I was waiting for since 2011. So I'm glad it came last year, and I'm excited. I like to get out in the community. I'm a part of the community, so I'm out there with my neighbors, my friends, my family, and I just want to continue making this a better place. It's a great place. We can always make it better, and I just want to be part of that. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, appreciate it. Any comments from the council?
Thanks for letting us be part of your promotional ceremony.
Yeah.
It's an honor to be part of that, and it's exciting to see such a young, new police department growing and creating opportunities for the great men and women of the department. So, well done.
Just thank you. Thank you for your service, for you and your family.
Thank you.
I've had the opportunity to sit across from you at a very small desk in my daughter's classroom. I know that you're part of the community, and we are ever the better for it, and we appreciate everything that you and your family's done for us. Thank you very much. With that, we will move on to the next item of business, which is our 2019 fireworks update. Chief Pilgrim.
Fireworks and
I was like, wait,
I
you're not
heard,
the
I
fire
heard they're
department?
canceled for
It's
the rest of the
both of them.
summer.
Yeah, is it over? Tonight we'll talk a little bit about the fireworks safety, what happened, we'll show you where it happened. We'll talk a little bit about the law and discharge dates and those kind of things. So bear with us, it'll be very exciting, I'm sure. So in Utah, Class C explosives means it's a Division 1.4G explosive, and that's a federal standard. In Utah, you have a Class C common state approved explosive. Basically what that says is that it can be purchased at a retail consumer, by a consumer at a retail place, and it is not a Class C dangerous explosive. The Class C dangerous explosive, things that make us lose our fingers, are firecrackers, cannon crackers, ground salutes, the M80s, cherry bombs. The list is pretty extensive, as you can see here. One of the defining factors to what is dangerous and what is common is 500 grams of pyrotechnic. That's going to become more important as we go on with this. It's very hard to determine what that is as we see these fireworks go off. Right?
Definitely.
Like-
That's what makes enforcement difficult, as you see in the next slides, is unless we're firework experts ourselves, it's hard to determine that just by seeing them in the air. So when people are calling those in, it's hard for us to gauge, is that legal, is it illegal? Sometimes you have a pretty good idea. So that's the first challenge we have. And then by the time we get there, the evidence is typically destroyed. And so it's extremely difficult to narrow down
Right.
what was actually shot off. So it's part of the challenge.
Yeah, and we'll talk, like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about that. The consequences, it's a $1,000 fine. It is an infraction, but it's a $1,000 fine when you discharge the Class C, whether it's outside the legal discharge dates and times or in an area which it's prohibited, which, as we'll see it in a Harriman map later, is quite a large parcel of the city itself. A municipality or metro township, you folks, can determine where those areas are and the negligent discharge of the Class C common state approved explosives. And Riley is the lucky fellow that gets to draw the map that makes people
Happy or not.
Yeah, happy or not. There is some civil liability. So if you decide that you want to shoot off fireworks and you burn down your neighbor's garage or house, or your children do that, you could be on the hook for that. So keep that in mind as you're lighting them off. Again, we're not trying to be the killjoys, but we are trying to make sure everybody's safe. And we'll talk a little bit about an injury that happened on the 4th of July that is extremely concerning. Currently, the restrictions are statewide. There are no fireworks allowed at all in the state. Why is that? We're outside of our discharge dates. So when you're outside of discharge dates, there is no, it's just not allowed. The whole state's restricted. And our discharge dates for the next time people can start this is July 22nd at 11 a.m. Again, they vary by local municipality, and UFA has a fantastic interactive map that I'll let Riley talk a little bit more about. But we hope to drive people to that so that they can recognize where they can and can't do it.
Yeah, the map is nice because if you haven't used it yet, it takes you down to your specific street address if you choose to go that far. One of the challenges I've noticed that we have is also at the Harriman City map, which you'll see here in a minute. It does show that we have the restricted areas, but it specifically states, and this is kind of as a result of the challenge or the fire we had on Saturday, even though it's not red on the map doesn't mean you're allowed to use fireworks there. So any open space or anywhere that's 200 feet within open space, those fireworks are still prohibited. So we had people lighting fireworks off at a church, started a field on fire adjacent to that next to the fire station in the church. Technically, even though it's not red on the map, that's still prohibited based off of those those guidelines. And so we can turn that red just to make it very clear to people. But that also opens two challenges. We'll have to identify other fields likely in the city. And according to state law with enforcing this stuff, typically what we need to look at is historical problem. So it can't just be, hey, we want to do this because, like, this is what we want to do. We have to take a 5-year period, and now that 5 years, 2 of those years have to exhibit or show that we've had issues. It doesn't have to be consecutive, it just has to be 2 years. And from my knowledge and what research we've been doing just since Saturday, that field in particular has not presented this kind of challenge, because typically people aren't lighting fireworks there. And so this highlighted a new challenge where there's people on church property, which we have no enforcement over, lighting fireworks. And so our suggestion is, when you see that, especially outside the dates, just call dispatch, call 911 if it's that urgent, and we'll get over there and do what we can. But this little fire we had Saturday that made quite a bit of news is just one of those unique, it really is one of those unique 1 in 100 fires that we run into that don't fall into some of these parameters, so.
All right, so when can they be sold? Class C fireworks will be sold June 24th, July 25th, and December 29th through the 31st, 2 days prior to and on Chinese New Year's Eve. When is it allowed to discharge them? For this year, it's July 2nd to July 5th. And it's typically till 11 p.m., but on those specific dates, the 4th and the 24th, they get to extend that to midnight. Same would be true on December 31st, 11 a.m. to 1 a.m. for the New Year's recognition on January 1st, and the Chinese New Year's Eve, again, till 1 a.m. Down at the bottom, it kind of indicates, as you'll see, that New Year's Eve, if it happens to fall on a Sunday and you so approve, people can do that on a Saturday until 1 a.m. Okay?
So, wait, go back,
Yes.
sorry. On July 25th, they can also light them off until,
Till 11 p.m.
11
Yeah,
p.m.?
11 p.m. on the 25th, and then it's off again. So, and then after the 25th at 11 p.m., we don't see that discharge date return until Christmas, or until New Year's Eve. Any questions on discharge dates? Okay. So now I'll turn the time over to Riley and his map.
So this is a map we came up with city staff. Like I say, we took this from, this is a map that gets turned into the county for the fire restrictions that are posted on our website. Typically we do that in April. So a lot of people do bring concerns to the table, but it's typically after the fact. A lot of people have concerns with restrictions in June and July when it's way too late for us to make any changes. And that's not our decision. That is a state law where we cannot just all of a sudden turn it red. And so what we encourage people to do, and I'm more than happy to go look at areas and visit with people, is, you know, when we're least expecting this in February, March, April is when we need to be talking, so we can look at these new suggestions and change it. If it makes sense to change it, I'm happy to do that and bring it to the council and the city staff and see if that's what we want to do. If it makes sense to restrict something, the same goes for that. But this map should be going in conjunction with the map that's on the website, where it does state the 200 feet rule. So I think a lot of people see the red map and that's what they use only. But it's important to remember that any open space is prohibited, and anything within 200 feet of that space is prohibited. And so what the thing that makes Harriman awesome is the open space, but it also presents a challenge when we get into firework restrictions. And so we want to make sure we offer as much of availability and ability to do fireworks, but again, prohibit or hopefully prevent the stuff that kind of happened on Saturday. So it's a little bit of a challenge there.
All right, so what happened on July 2nd to July 7th? This is a little snapshot we took as far as statistics goes, and it basically points out, and when we talk about the calls that we received, it's specific to fireworks. We went on much more calls, but this is specific to fireworks. HPD received 32 calls for service related to the unlawful fireworks in a restricted area discharge, and 1 injury. So we had 29 restricted area calls, and we'll see this here in a minute on a heat map. 1 unlawful discharge and 1 injury. And then we did an agency assist with Unified Fire, and that was on a field fire that happened on July 6th. Okay, we've talked a little bit about that, and we may talk a little bit more. And then UFA.
Yeah, kind of unusual for us during this time frame specifically. We had an actual pretty small call volume. So during that, you know, if we count 2nd to the 7th, so almost that 6-day span there, we actually only had 18 calls total in Harriman, and 2 were related to fireworks. One was a firework-related burn injury on the 4th of July. One was a field fire on the 6th. And so part of that we attribute to the rain that came in the day of. I think that dampened some of the fuels. And so the typical small field fires that we go on dozens upon dozens across the valley, those weren't happening. I think even just us as an agency, valley-wide, 21 calls firework-related that night, and 32 units responded to those. And, you know, only one was a field fire. The rest were small dumpster fires or just small incidental fires related to fireworks in someone's property. So for us, especially on the 4th of July, as a county as a whole in this Harriman, extremely low call volume. As you can see here, even I'll just continue with this and give out Chief Carr. So that day, the 4th of July, we had 2 calls in Harriman, which I was shocked. So we called Beck, and they verified 2 calls. We pulled our RMS reports. They verified 2 calls. One was a fall, and one was a firework-related burn, which was fairly significant. Won't share details, but what it does do, though, is highlight how dangerous these can be if they're not properly used. I'm not saying these were or weren't, but I think it's a great reminder that these fireworks, especially these bigger, more powerful ones, are extremely dangerous. And if they're not used properly, or if you have a problem with one and it's not taken care of the right way, you can potentially expose yourself and your family and your friends and anyone in the area to some extreme harm. And so this individual was kind of burned, traumatic injury, definitely not something we want to see and don't want them to experience on the 4th of July. So, but it was related to, as far as I know, malfunctioning firework that didn't operate correctly. So those were the only 2 calls that we had that night, which is interesting, and no field fires until the big one the one on the 6th by Juniper Crest. So.
And we received, as you can see, 20 calls, 19 restricted area, and the 1 injury call that we assisted fire with. What's interesting for us is we should have seen about 3 times that amount of calls.
Yeah.
And so we're not quite sure. We double-checked our records, and then we checked with UFA and thought, this is quite strange. However, we do know that on the 4th, it's a little bit lighter call than we get on the 24th. The 24th is the pull out all the stops party. So hopefully we'll get a little bit of some rain that day as well, just to keep things wet for us, right? We did a heat map, and to kind of give you an idea of where we were having the big issues. Up towards West Harriman, you could definitely see some onesies and twosies in neighborhoods. City Center, which is in the town center, and a largely restricted area, and fully restricted by the HOA, I might add. But what we see is mostly down to the kind of the south and east, around the new high school and on Autumn Crest there. We see a huge influx of fireworks calls down there. And we'll further dig through what we gathered here to try and find out why. It helps us kind of understand where we probably need to go to put resources in the future. And it isn't uncommon, in fact, it's usually our practice that fire and police are out rolling around that night proactively. So,
Would we postulate that by chance that's where many new residents are that might not know the rules?
That's my guess.
I mean, it's hard to tell.
If I was to make a guess right now, just based off of where a lot of your construction's occurring and a rapid influx of people moving in, and probably people who are unaware of the restrictions, and you got apartments, you know, and townhouses, and just a lot of density there, right? A lot of people, you're probably going to experience that there. And so, and it's an open area. There's, like I say, it's probably that.
And I do believe you're going to have an opportunity to see some public service announcements that Riley starred in. He's an amazing actor. Read his lines fantastically, so we cast him for it. But I think that had quite a bit to do with people understanding what they're allowed to do here. But it's new this year, and the communications department, again, as I always say, it takes the whole city to pull these things off. They came through and made some fantastic videos for us, and my hat's off to Tammy and her crew. Any other questions on the heat map before we move on? Okay. All right, so how do we respond? We get this quite a bit. Why are you not out arresting everybody that's lighting off fireworks because my dog's scared and we need to handle this? And largely the reality is it's hard for us to identify where they're coming from. And it's also hard, especially in legal areas, for us to identify if it's over that 500 grams, right? By the time we get there, the burden of proof in court for us to achieve is that I can say that, you know, Mayor Watts was the one that touched the flame to, hypothetically. That
All
didn't really
right.
happen. But it was the one that touched the match to that firework, and therefore he's the one getting the citation. But when we pull up, generally speaking, if we can find where it initiated from, there's 30 people standing there. And to be honest, the majority of the time we get an anonymous complainant with a general address. So it's a little bit hard for us. And it's a little bit frustrating when we hear, well, we called you, and then there's no dispatch history for any calls in that area. So we will respond during restricted dates to any fireworks call. Doesn't matter where it's at. If it's restricted, we'll respond. However, during legal discharge dates, it's a little hard for us when you see 60 calls coming in, like we typically would get, to go to all of those. So if we're receiving generalized calls in areas where there is no reported risk to people or property, we will ATL it. What that means is attempt to locate. We'll have the officers look for it, and if they find it in that area, they'll have a conversation with the folks and see if it's legal or not. Otherwise, if it's in a non-discharge area, we respond to all of those and try and determine again. Almost all of the time we pull up and there's 30 or 40 people there, and everybody's doesn't have an idea what happened, right? Oh, it wasn't us. And most of the time, fire and police co-respond. That's why we were trying to determine how fire ended up on 2 calls and we only ended up on 20, even at that, right? So it was a good holiday for us in that regard. There are times that we get there and we'll call fire, or if it's a reported actual fire, again, we'll co-respond. But our typical complaints are, why is it legal on one side of the street and not the other? We get that a lot, because there has to be a line somewhere, right? There's always a number, there's always a line, and if you're on the other side of that, call Riley.
In April.
Thanks.
But, yeah, so, I mean,
I'd be happy to talk to you.
yeah, it really is, at some point, we have to draw that line, right? And there's always gonna be winners and losers in that situation. And the other one is my neighbor's lighting illegal fireworks, and we get those general anonymous addresses that we respond to.
3 blocks away, right?
Yeah, typically, that's what it is. And there are times that they shoot our police cars with fireworks. We've had that happen once, so he got a ticket. Is there any questions?
Those are generally easier to find, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it was frightening, but it was easy to find. It was the guy going, oops, that was a police car that just pulled around the corner. So he was super easy to find.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to share on the response piece, and I think I don't want to say there's confusion, but I want people to understand kind of our approach, and it's both sides, is we do tend to educate before we enforce. Most people honestly may not have known, and what they've done probably isn't barring being penalized, what they could be penalized. They made an innocent mistake. Typically, they take ownership immediately. And if it's like a call where there's no harm, no foul, like no fire, it's just in a restricted area, we can work with them. And typically, they're not repeat offenders. Right. So we like this education approach, which, if you think of it this way, it's more of a warning. Because if we come back, you're probably going to get a citation. Right. Most people are very compliant. Most people are very friendly. Most people are very apologetic. Now, we do have those cases where they're belligerent or unwilling to cooperate, and that's when we will exercise our other abilities to educate them, which is a fine or a citation. But our approach really is education. We want to come out there like we're heavy-handed, and we want to be the fun wreckers. But we want to make sure that people are out there, they're obeying these laws, they're obeying these, these standards, and that they're safe. I think that's our biggest thing is safety. We had the one injury, and I think people underestimate what a firework can do to either a home, an open field, the damage that can happen. And once they learn, and it sounds weird, but some people just don't know. And once we go over that with them, they typically don't do it again. And so that's kind of our approach. Now, we exercise those tools and we use them as appropriate. And so that's one thing we want to make sure everyone knows too is we want to be fair, but we want to be just. We want to make sure that that's happening, when we see these things. And like Chief Carr says, hard when you show up and the evidence gone, there's 30, 40, 50, 60 people there. And that's a great opportunity to educate that many people versus start interrogating them all. And so that's kind of our approach to community fire, community policing, is making sure we're being engaged versus antagonists towards them. So.
And there are times, if it's a property burn only, and there's no people involved that have been injured or hurt, those investigations get turned over to the fire department. Yeah. The captain on scene will determine whether or not that goes to the arson investigator, correct?
And the arson investigators will typically review anything that stands out. I talked to him today about this case on Juniper Crest, and their response is in line with ours. Education is effective. you know, what was happened, the damage done, which is very minimal, other than, it's good for people to be aware that that problem created some excitement and some concerns for the residents who were close to that field. And I think that, in turn, whoever lit that saw that. And so education, they did talk to that whole group. We actually had one injury on that firefighter injury. So, and that's the other danger too, is that, you know, police and fire are exposed to these risks, and we're out there trying to do this stuff so everyone can have fun. But yeah, we'll try to do our best to educate and take care of it that way, so.
Now's our opportunity to
Oh,
see
man.
our cast type
That's right.
battalion chief.
That's right, step out. Yeah.
How do we make it?
I don't think
How
it
do
works.
we make
I
it
think
play?
we're good.
It may not work.
Yeah, I think we're good.
It's a great look.
Harriman City, Harriman Police Department, the Unified
Oh,
Fire
no
Authority.
sound.
I'd like to wish everybody in Harriman a happy and safe 4th and 24th of July. We encourage you guys to have fun celebrations as you go out and do things as friends and families. We also have some suggestions that if you choose to light fireworks, some steps, some tips that you guys can implement to make sure you guys have a safe
Facebook stuff.
and
Oh, this is a shame.
Right,
It really
and
is.
Riley was concerned about this exact problem, so I have a feeling like he's probably derailed.
Almost like our,
Oh, man.
While we work on this, do you guys have any questions about the fireworks, the discharge, any issues that have been reported to you?
do we
You'd
have
like us to look into?
exciting 4th of July.
citation issues? Is that
This year,
the extent of
fireworks may be
citations?
discharged July 2nd.
You mean on
Through the 5th.
Fireworks?
The injury one, or are we talking about the one that burned the field?
Maybe you could,
Well, the one that burned the field, we turned over to fire to investigate, and I don't know exactly where that's at, what the arson investigator did with that.
Yeah, they're looking at, I think it's gonna be closed case as far as, I talked to him about the penalties. There's a reckless burning, which is a Class B misdemeanor. And then there's discharge in a restricted area, which is equivalent to a traffic citation. So
Well,
he felt
this
going back.
this particular one was discharged outside of the restricted dates, though, correct?
Correct.
Yes, this was a no
So-
discharge date.
And again, the
So,
weird,
so back to the discussion of whether this should be in the restricted area or not, that's really irrelevant in this case because the discharge was outside of the
I would
restricted
agree.
dates anyways.
yeah.
That's exactly
And,
right.
and it's a weird dynamic because it is on LDS church property.
Right.
Which, maybe
Just-
they got a letter from their bishop and they could do it there. Our advice to those citizens in that area is they need to contact someone in that church, whoever, and follow up on that, because the church will have the ultimate decision on pursuing people lighting fireworks on their property. We could go after the reckless burning in the unrestricted area, but I say the captain engaged the individual, and I know PD engaged with that person and persons, and based off of what they found on the scene at that moment, they felt their actions were appropriate as far as education, stern warning. And like I said, I passed on to our arson guy. He's gonna look at it, but he was along those lines too. That was appropriately handled, so.
And you're right, Mayor, we will issue citations. It certainly isn't something you're going to go to jail for.
Yeah.
However, if you burn down houses and those kind of
Yeah.
things, that could change that story, especially if people are in the home and were injured. So to your point, yes, we write citations the night of, and we'll write more on the 24th. I'm
so
sure.
we did end up
Yeah.
writing a few
Yeah.
citations.
And that really does boil down to whether the officer can meet the burden of proof and identify that person that did it.
I know that this council and councils past have always taken the approach of education first, and we don't want to go out with a heavy hand. And so I just was, trying to figure out where we were in that particular process.
Right, and I'll be honest, most of the time, we can deal with it under educational standards, but there are those times where we get there, and it's largely fueled by alcohol too on that night, that we don't get that response, and there is a citation in order for that.
Or if
that
they
person or
shoot a
persons.
firework at a police car.
Yeah, when they shoot at the firework at the police car, they definitely got a citation. And kind of to close on what Chief Pilgrim said, it's really hard for us when we have people on private property to manage that, because we're not the agent of the corporation or the property. So we can't go in there and say you're no longer allowed here. It has to be somebody from that corporation, that church, that business that comes in, or that home that comes in and says that this person or these people are not allowed here any longer. And then we can act on that once we're called and they're in violation of that.
But what about if it's on, because it was on a date they couldn't be lighting fireworks?
Right.
So you could.
We can pursue
You
that.
But
could
that's
pursue
separate
that
from
then,
the
right?
trespassing.
It could be cited just
Yeah, there was some concern by our residents about trespassing in that area. And once we're notified by the church that specific people cannot trespass, And we've been given that notice, and they're there to say, these are the people that we have trespassed. Usually what'll happen is in the first trespassing, we'll document it with police report. You know, so-and-so is trespassed from the church. We show up there and they're on the church property again, they get a citation. So in this case, it's very difficult. It seems very easy to say, well, they shouldn't have been there, so therefore they're trespassing. That's not exactly how that works. However, you're absolutely right. It was outside of the discharge date.
Yeah, and that's what I was torn on. So the discharge date was an issue. I was actually leaning towards pushing for a citation. But again, talking with the people who were on the scene that night, working with individuals, they felt otherwise. And so it's still within the statute of limitations. If we wanted to pursue this, we definitely can. There's gonna be some more discussion on that, but my leaning towards citing versus what the people on the scene found, I really got to give their side credit as well, since I wasn't there, so.
And I think we'd always defer to the experts on scene over,
And that
us sitting up here.
That specific issue is a complex issue. It was an area, again, that was outside the restricted zone, had it been on a discharge day.
Yeah.
That people felt like they need to come there. And as we've learned from the residents in that area, it seems to be a fairly standard thing that happens. They all
Year
go to
after
that
year after
church
year.
on
Yeah.
discharge dates because it's outside the restricted zone and they light off fireworks.
Makes sense.
And I think that's probably the core of their complaint. And we'll have a little bit better optic on that as we move forward. But again, we need the church to kind of give us some parameters on how they want us to handle that.
Yeah, so my thought on that was to go after the root of the problem, not just the one symptom that came from it. And so I'm gonna come with some stuff and we'll see what we can do to engage the church, hopefully, to be a little more strict on that.
We do
so.
sympathize with the residents. in that
Yeah,
area
for
that-
sure.
that those things are happening. As I understand it from our technical crowd, you're ready for prime time.
Oh, yeah.
Woohoo.
So
Let's
do I
this.
press a button or?
There's no going back. It's already out there on the interwebs.
You're fine.
Put your speaker down, your microphone down by it.
Suggestions that if you choose to light fireworks, some steps and tips that you guys can implement to make sure that you guys have a safe and exciting 4th of July.
This year, fireworks may be discharged July 2nd through the 5th, with hours from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., with one additional hour being allowed on the 4th of July.
You can visit the interactive firework map on airman.org and unifiedfire.org, which will show places where using fireworks is approved.
The safest way to enjoy fireworks is to attend a public display that's put on by trained professionals. However, if you wish to shoot off your own fireworks, just please use extreme caution.
If there's high winds, precipitation, or any kind of adverse weather, I'd recommend postponing the fireworks, any discharging. Just wait till that movement passes, and then you can start up again.
If you look on the firework restrictions map, you may notice that Harriman City does have quite a few restrictions on where you can and can't light off fireworks. The city has quite a bit of what we call the wildland urban interface. We've got a lot of open areas, a lot of dry, flammable grass that's grown tall this spring with all the moisture, and it's dried out over the last month. So we ask that you are really cognizant of that fireworks restrictions map. The potential for large fires out here in Harriman is high. It seems like every year we have 2 or 3 large fires that threaten structures, and we want to try and prevent that over the holiday weekends.
I want to come to the rescue of my firefighter brothers and sisters. I think the teleprompter was broke.
I think Riley did the best in all of that, though.
It was fantastic.
Riley,
It
I
was
thought out of all those people, you're definitely the best.
That was like take 12.
Yeah.
So.
Good job.
I believe we have a second one. I'm looking
We
forward to
do.
it.
We pushed out 2. And both.
I would recommend keeping your day job at this point.
I wouldn't.
Man, I thought it had a mate. Yeah, there you go.
I remember. Do I press another button or no? Yes.
If you'd like to report any type of firework infraction, there are 2 ways to do that. If it's a non-emergency situation, you can call the dispatch's non-emergency phone number, which is area code 801-840-4000. That would be for any non-emergent situation. If there is a fire, anything threatening homes or the hillsides, so an emergency situation, just use 911 call to report it. Make sure you know the location, the address of where the actual incident is occurring, so you can report that to the dispatchers, and the fire department and police department will respond. For people who are found discharging fireworks illegally in restricted areas, the Harriman Police Department, along with some of the Unified Fire Authority inspectors and safety personnel, will be out and about in the community throughout the next several days and over the weekend of the 24th as well, to help answer questions and to enforce any rule violations. Egregious rule violations could be punishable with fines up to $1,000.
So again, we
Good
think
job.
that probably, we hope that had a large impact on everybody as we push these out. And Tammy, help me out. We started pushing those out on July 1st or 2nd. We sent out messages every day, as you probably saw, to try and drive people to these videos and to hopefully some prevention things to keep people from getting hurt. So, any questions for us on the big day?
How do we get it to rain on the 24th?
We really is pushing to get to Hollywood.
So
Yes, sir.
excited.
How do we get it to rain on the 24th as well?
Rain?
How do we get it to rain on the 24th as well?
I'm not 100% certain on that, so we'll just hope for it.
Quit lighting fireworks at the church.
Yeah, we'll definitely have our eye on the church through that period. Any questions?
Good
for
job.
us?
Thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you.
Yes.
I guess that's
Awesome. Okay, we will move on to the public hearing portion of our meeting. Item 9.1, public hearing to consider the adoption of a public safety impact fee facilities plan. John Brems, our city attorney.
Yeah, let me give you a brief explanation of what we're doing here. This is a three-stage process to enact an impact fee to pay for a public safety building. The first is the IFFP, or the Impact Fee Facility Plan, and that is what is needed. The second step is the basis for allocating that need. And then the third is the enactment and imposing the fee. So it'll be three separate hearings, all to arrive at the end result. No action, just listen to what the public has to say, and this will be on the next meeting.
And I would ask the council if we give the residents some leeway if they speak to one and not the other, or when they can speak whenever, just simply because it's probably confusing as to what exactly they're speaking to. So if you have an item, feel free to come up and speak. With our public hearings, the same process as our public comments portion of our meeting will apply. If you have any, we ask that if you do have a something for the public hearing, please come up to the podium and state your name at this time. And this will be for item 9.1. Okay, seeing none, I will accept a motion to close the public hearing on item 9.1.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Motion is second. Nicole? Or all in favor, actually?
Aye.
Aye.
Item 9.2, public hearing to consider the adoption of the public safety impact fee analysis, which our city attorney just spoke to. If you have any comment, please come up at this time. Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes. Item 9.3, public hearing to consider an ordinance for the public safety fee enactment. If you have any comment, please come up at this time. Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes. All right, we'll move on to this consent agenda.
All right, Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
A second.
Okay, motion and a second by Jared. Sherry?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
I vote yes, that motion passes. All right, item 11.1, discussion and consideration of a text change to the Land Development Code to allow cannabis production as a conditional use in the A1 agriculture and M1 manufacturing zones. Our city planner, Mike Malone.
Thank you. 2 weeks ago, I briefed the City Council on this item. This is in response to a change in state law where the state code is now saying that if a city has agriculture or manufacturing zones, we must identify locations where we may allow a cannabis production facility as a conditional use. Now, to specify, we're not talking about a dispensary. This is only for manufacturing purposes. This will be heavily regulated by the state. The current ordinance or current code says that they may permit up to 10 sites or 10 licenses throughout the state. And we're simply amending our code to be in line with state code. It may be an indoor or outdoor facility. An indoor facility is limited to 100,000 square feet. An outdoor facility would be 4 acres. There are proximity requirements. Again, only 10 permits will be issued by the state. Again, we're referencing state code, and Planning Commission did review this and made a recommendation for adoption to the City Council. We're showing the A1 as a conditional use and also the M1 zone as a conditional use.
Discussion by the council. Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 2019-22 authorizing a text change to the Land Development Code to allow cannabis production as a conditional use in A1 agricultural and M1 manufacturing zones.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Clint?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
I vote yes, that motion passes. Item 11.2, discussion and consideration of an ordinance to authorize a text change to the Land Development Code to permit 8.25 agriculture zone. Once again, our city planner.
Again, this was an item that we briefed the City Council on 2 weeks ago. As a text change, the Planning Commission has reviewed and recommended approval of the proposal that has been submitted to you in your packets. The 8.25 zone is a previous zoning tool that we have used as a city. The current ordinance prohibits any further rezoning or use of this zone for new zoning amendment applications. So the purpose of this text change is to remove that restriction so that a property owner or an applicant could request the 8.25 zone again, which would allow for low-density residential housing in an agricultural zone. However, this text amendment also removes some of the density bonuses that were in the previous version, and it lowers the maximum density from a 2.8 to 2.5. Again, all of these recommendations were supported by the Planning Commission for your consideration tonight. I can tell you that we have had some interest from current applicants who would like to take advantage of this zone if the council chooses to approve it.
Is that those with current applications in?
So we have some pending applications. We had one that was tracking towards the Planning Commission, and they were tabled pending the result of this request tonight.
So my issue with it is the history of this. It was put on hold essentially like 3 years ago. And I guess there's like 2 or 3 changes in all this, and boom, it's back. I guess I'm just confused about if that was all that needed changed. Why has this been on hold for 3 years?
Yeah, I'll speak to that.
And I don't know the history of that issue.
Nicole and I were. At the time, we were considering an entirely new, and correct me if I'm wrong, an entirely new low-density agricultural zone, which eventually didn't pass the council.
Mm-hmm.
And it just has never been brought back. So because that new zone, the intention was to replace this with that new zone. The new zone didn't pass. And so since that time, there's been no option for somebody that wants to do A25.
Jared, I don't know if you remember, or maybe Mike, you can do this, knowing some of the history. Do you remember why the low density agricultural zone that was proposed to take the place of this
It was
was
a
not
split
eventually
vote, 3
passed?
to 2 of that. of the council at that time.
At the time.
So it's,
Do you recall what the concerns were with that proposal? I guess versus
I
what
didn't
the
have
cha-
any concerns that I
versus
voted
the
for it.
changes that we see in the 8.25 before us tonight.
As far as the A25, I mean, we're bringing back a tool for people to use for this type of development. It was put on hold in anticipation of a new one being passed. The new one didn't pass the threshold of the council at the time, so we just simply need this tool again. So they've made a few adjustments to go in the direction of what the other one was. It doesn't fully go that direction, but I personally am comfortable with these changes to this particular zone.
Nicole, do you want to have it?
I keep looking at
Since you
Nicole,
have the
like,
some of the
make sure
history
I
as well,
stay in
do you
check.
have anything you want to add?
No, I mean, I think it's unfair to speak to the mindset of a previous council. I
Right.
think we're looking at a tool as the council as we sit now. I think that's what we ought to look at.
Sure, sure.
Well said.
I agree with that. I was just curious about more the history, if it's, I think because we're talking about a low-density agricultural zone, and anytime I think about agricultural, 2.5 to me is not good with animals, or whatever you're gonna call it agricultural, then I don't understand why you even call it agricultural. Do you see what
Well,
I'm saying?
Yes, and the difference between an A zone and an R zone is there will be some additional animal rights. It may not be large animal rights because of the size of the lot,
Right.
but there are some additional options within the A zones.
So for instance, the infamous chickens. Et
Bees,
cetera. So there are limitations on, you can't have a large animal in a 2.5.
Yeah, at what
No,
point?
you can't
But
have a
there-
sheep
there are-
either, right?
But there are others that you can have in a 2.5 that you would not be able to have in an R.
I know we have that specified out in code, but what's the threshold for a large animal?
Half acre.
Half acre?
I believe Councilmember Orton's right. I would also suggest, and I mentioned this 2 weeks ago when we talked about this, that perhaps this is still an interim step. Personally, coming to the city, I'm thinking 8.25, that means that the lot should be a quarter acre. Well, we're talking in this regulation, as we do in most of our regulations, about gross densities. So you still end up with lots that are actually less than a quarter acre. I would suggest that maybe upon completion of our new general plan, that we look at whether or not we change from a gross measurement to a net density measurement. And we actually heard that from our consultant who presented to you on the Olympia Hills study. So it's an issue for further conversation, but it's actually, this is a rather, it's not a straightforward tool. When a property owner hears that they're in an 8.25 zone and they think that automatically they have the ability to do a quarter acre lot, well, there's a number of restrictions that come along with that. So it's a little bit more complex than maybe it needs to be.
How big is the property that's got an application in?
I don't recall, I wasn't the planner processing it, but I believe it's seems like it's like a 20 or a 30 lot
Somewhere that would
subdivision.
be looking for at
Yeah.
gross densities, not the individual, okay.
Right.
Yeah, I guess that's just my concern, and my biggest concern is doing this now is just simply because I know that there's things that are gonna get approved on it, which is fine, which is the purpose, but then it worries me that, oh, we just hurry and fix it now, and then we're gonna come back and fix it later how we want it, but we've already approved a bunch more houses on it. See my
Well, the
concern?
change that I would support, like I said, thinking is it's a more global change. It's a broader change that maybe we have the ability or time to take on right now.
Sure.
And again, the commission, the planning commission, as we talked about earlier about potential changes in our subdivision code or zoning changes, I think they're very much in line. They share your concerns as a council. And this is a product or a tool that they have recommended for your consideration. So
Sure.
I think they're seeing that we've removed some of the density bonuses. We've lowered the density limit in this 8.25. They've seen the potential of how it might be used on a pending subdivision amendment or request. And it's their recommendation that you approve it. But that's,
Is there a
again,
minimum lot size on this zone?
No, the minimum lots, well, there's a minimum lot size, I apologize, but you don't have to have a minimum area in order to apply for the 8.25. That was a requirement of one of the previous density bonuses.
What's the minimum lot size for, that would be in place? if
So
we're
it's
going back?
2.5 lots per acre, and then you have to subtract out the roads and,
But for,
It depends
just
on-
for a single individual lot, is there a specific lot size requirement?
I'd have to double check I'm gonna believe that it's 10,000 square feet, but I'd have to double check the table for you on that.
That would be my biggest, so
Yeah.
for the council's benefit, just where I'm sitting, I'm kind of in agreement with Sherry at this point. I'm not comfortable approving this particular item quite yet. I would be far more comfortable if there was a minimum lot size for this interim where we're trying to give that was more of that quarter acre size so that we're not going to get what we're trying to avoid. And we talked about earlier with re-subdividing areas that is not our intent. And so I don't want to bring back a tool that allows that to happen when we don't want that to happen in the first place. And so for now, as worded, I would not be comfortable approving it. However, if we added something like a minimum lot size that was close to a quarter acre for any individual lot, I think I'd be a lot more comfortable with it. That's just kind of where I sit right now.
The issue I'd have with that is that what's the difference between this and all the other existing zones? The same way what Michael's talking about is a global change of doing all the zones in net versus gross. So I would be opposed to waiting just for that to get this zone approved. Everything else is already in gross. We're saying we don't want any smaller agricultural lots until we change all the zones to report as net versus gross. That doesn't make much sense to me. To me, that we haven't had this tool for 3 years. We've had all these developments come in, these smaller ones where this would apply, that would allow people to have smaller animals, et cetera, that they're not allowed to because it's not an option. I'd be more in favor of, yes, we need to get this back in. It's been gone for 3 years. We've missed opportunities to have this in places. And if we want to make a more global change to everything from gross to net, which I would definitely support, then we can do that. That applies to everything. I don't see any reason to make this wait unless there's a reason that the actual zone itself needs to be changed.
Michael, will you pop it back to the density bonus things that were there
Yes.
stricken, so I can see those again?
Well, and I was just going to make a comment that
One more.
this was
Yeah, that one.
obviously something that was at the time that I was sitting on the planning commission. And I think from the planning commission standpoint at that time, and also what I remember hearing from the council at the time, is that the concern is that we had it set too high, and there were we weren't getting what we really wanted out of the requirements for, I guess, this extra bonus density. And that's where the concern was really coming from.
Exactly.
Is that we put these things in, they're trying to help limit and really enhance a project, but at the end of the day, we weren't getting the desired effect, the desired result out of it. And so that's when, and there was a couple of other factors in the time. Those have moved, I think, beyond the scope of this particular proposed ordinance now. And then just simply, as Jared said, nothing was ever brought back. The low-density agricultural was brought forward. It wasn't passed at the time. And now we haven't had a tool to adequately, in this genre of, especially agricultural, which is something that I think that we've heard time and time again is something that we want to encourage and we want to preserve in this community, but something on the smaller side where people don't want the large animal, and they don't want to have the half acre to have to maintain to do it, but they do still want some of those protections that come with the agricultural zone on the smaller side.
Sure.
I understand the concern that Mayor Watts has expressed on the minimum lot size, but essentially you have that in there with, it's just on the gross perspective and not the net perspective. And in order to change that, it would require a global shift in the way that we approach that.
So as far as the zone itself, I mean, speaking to that point, the concerns, at least that we had at the time, from what I see in the zone, those are the things that have been taken off as some of those extra densities. It's just bonuses that didn't make sense to kind of preserve the intent of the agricultural A25.
Yeah, those were, because obviously during the process, I was definitely at planning commission meetings yelling at myself. But because I hate seeing like a detention pond getting getting an extra 3 lots. It's like, this is ridiculous, what is going on?
That's where that desired effect was not coming.
Exactly, and so
through.
this is taking that out, right?
Right.
Those have been my biggest concerns, is because,
Yeah.
and you're gonna continue to have those if you allow it, right? They're gonna come in and push it up, went from 1.8 to 2.8 at the very first meeting that this was implemented. The very first person who came in was clear at the maximum, and it was a detention pond, and it was, just as a resident, it was really frustrating to see that, so.
Well, and the other thing you can't do is you can't have an ordinance that says a maximum of 2.5 and then no clear way for them to ever get there.
Yeah.
That's pretty disingenuous as well. So you've actually
Sure.
you've got to just make sure that if you're going to say that, you give them a path to actually be able to achieve that. You just have to hold them to, again, the expectation of what we expect out of that product.
And the path can be rocky and uphill really bad, right?
As long as it's in
Just
code.
kidding.
Mayor Watts, I looked up the answer to your question. It is 10,000 square feet minimum in the 8.25 zone. However, using some of the density bonus tools or a plan development tool, it can be reduced down to 8,500 square feet. So that would be the minimum under this,
That, I think, would be
under
my
this
concern.
proposed ordinance. A quarter acre lot would add, if we just went to a net, it would be 10,890 square feet. So it would be an additional 890 square feet if we ever decided to amend the tool and
Yeah,
do
it's not
that.
the 800 feet that bothers me, it's the 2,500 that bothers me
Right.
when they gross it out.
Yeah, no, so I guess, I do believe that there needs to be a tool, because we definitely have areas in our city that they have, I wrote my message into Planning Commission when this was before them a few weeks ago, stating exactly that they were proposed to have an R110 at this particular location, and they can't. It's, according to our master plan, it's agricultural, and so, but we've left no tool for them to develop other than if they go to an 8.5, which I'd be glad for them to do, but
Yeah.
but in fairness, there should be a tool for them.
Yeah.
And 3 years is a long time to wait
Long time.
to create a tool.
Well, I have one other question, I guess, or comment for discussion. The very last one on there, as far as the bonus densities goes, the 0.3 units per acre for donation for public uses, and one of them on there is public school. And while I definitely support people donating for public school, I just haven't seen that happen recently. And I think there's a lot of challenges when it comes to a donation for a public school in some of these smaller ones that we're talking about, and how we effectively really manage that, again, for the benefit of the city, which is really intended here in the ordinance, is to be a city benefit. So again, while I want to encourage people to make those donations for our public purposes, the one on public buildings, other public community facilities, I think those are general enough that those are things that we can see. For me, I don't know, I guess that one stood out to me as far as having public schools in there, because again, I think there's a lot of other dynamics at play there that make it very challenging to make that a viable option in there.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
I don't know, Brett, you work with the school districts a lot in the community, and we have a great relationship with them. But is this something that's really going to be a viable option for somebody to? It's going to take a large piece of land to donate for a public school, and I don't see that happening in the realm of a development of 8.25. Now, possibly, if this is a tool that's used in the Danzy property, okay, I guess you see that, but to my knowledge, they've already went in and purchased that property.
Yeah, and the development agreement is they already have, none of it was an A25.
Right. So, something that just kind of stood out to me as I reviewed this and had that in there is something that I think is, again, as we talk about having a path for someone that's developing a piece of land, being able to get there, and a tool and desired effects, that to me just doesn't really seem like a viable one.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree, and for a lot of other reasons, I'll skip.
You'll refrain from further comment.
Good?
Okay, if there's no further comment or discussion, I'd be happy to accept some sort of a motion on this.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 2019-23, authorizing a text change to the land development code to permit the use of A.25 agricultural zone with the elimination of donation to the city as site for a public school.
Second.
Is that sufficient enough to get our intent on the record, Jackie? Okay. I have a motion and a second. Nicole?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote no. That motion passes. All right. We have our next meeting for the Planning Commission will be July 18th at 7 p.m. There will not be another general city council meeting this month. The next general city council meeting will be in August. However, there will be a joint Planning Commission city council meeting at 6 p.m. on July 31st. Our Yeti in the Park is July 11th. We have between July 11th through 13th and the 15th to the 20th is the Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat at Butterfield Park put on by the Harriman Arts Council. They always do a fantastic job. I'm looking forward to that again this year. And then again, we have Yeti in the Park on the 17th of July. We have a spike ball tournament at Crane Park on July 29th, and the ribbon cutting for the Arches Park, which has been under construction for some time now, will be on July 30th at 5 p.m. We also have the Creek Ridge Park ribbon cutting at 5 p.m. on August 2nd. Other than that, I just want to take a moment to remind our residents that we do have a city council election coming up. The primaries are coming up in a few weeks, and we would encourage all of those residents that are in that affected district to reach out to those candidates running, learn about them, and become informed voters for that particular election. Other than that, I will accept a motion to adjourn and move to a closed session.
I'll make a motion to temporarily recess the city council meeting to convene in a closed session for the purpose to discuss pending or reasonable imminent litigation and the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property as provided by Utah Code annotated 52-4-205.
Second.
Motion is second. Clint?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
I vote yes, that motion passes. Thank you very much. We will not have any other work items for a public meeting after this, so once our closed session is finished, we will be concluding our meetings.